otherwise, I'd like to introduce our speaker. So we're very, very honoured to have our guest speaker, who some of you may have heard before. I've heard Dr. Jaser in Lewis, and she spoke very passionately about the Palestinian cause, and I think you've also spoken in Hastings and Brighton, so a very, very warm welcome to you. Dr. Jaser is an Italian-Palestinian academic whose work focuses on power, colonialism, and organizational dynamics. She has written widely on Palestinian issues, and her work has appeared in a range of publications, including the Financial Times magazine. Her recent research examines how racialization has shaped the ongoing Nakba, the historical and continuing displacement and fragmentation of the Palestinian people. Her paper, The Industry of Silence, the Ongoing Nakba and Racialization of Palestinians, explores how systems of power and colonial narratives can obscure Palestinian experiences and sustain the structures of exclusion. The research draws on the writings of black feminist scholars such as Audre Lorde and Bell Hooks, or Gloria Watkins as she's originally known, to examine the politics of voice, silence and resistance. I'd like you all to give a very, very warm welcome to our guest speaker tonight.
Thank you so much, Nick. It's a very moving introduction. With many of these talks, I need to say that it's a very good chaperone, and we've met all the ceremonies, so thank you very much. It's lovely to be here in Eastbourne. Initially, these talks were done almost secretly behind closed doors. Now they're becoming really much more open, so things are moving. I'm also grateful to the people of Emmanuel Church to host us. And one day we will see these kind of talks happening everywhere, and the Palestinian flag also flying everywhere. It's just a matter of time. So I'm going to speak tonight about the silencing of Palestinians, and I want to do, first I will always start this talk by saying how beautiful Palestine is. Palestine is, and I will speak quite a lot about this in my introduction, but the first thing that I do always when I speak is about reminding and remembering about the people that have died in the last 3 years and 3 years plus 75 years. And the incredibly painful situation of Gaza right now, the fact that the genocide is ongoing, and the fact that our work is becoming a little bit easier in the West should not distract us from the fact that nothing is actually changing in Palestine. And this is very, 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 very important, that we do not ever get complacent about the fact that we publish a paper, we are invited at a talk, there are more and more talks, there are more and more marches. This work is infinite. We really need to think that our enemy is infinite, and therefore our work of resistance, in whatever way will come, is infinite. Otherwise the Palestinian people will get erased. So the post is very, very big. And as we can see, it's not just the Palestinian people. I just want to mention our Lebanese brothers and sisters. And I also want to say, and this will come out very clearly from my talk, that what we are witnessing is supremacy, and therefore many other people should be reminded in this talk, and these people from Sudan, and so on and so forth. So, from Congo, and I will speak a lot about colonialism today, so the silence is designed by colonialism. So I'm going to start my talk now. So the first thing I want to say is that Palestine is an incredibly, incredibly beautiful place, and it's a really beautiful people. My father, I'm going to give a little bit of an introduction personally. You know, I'm Italian-Palestinian. You can hear my Italian accent. I will never get rid of it. My mom is Italian, my father is Palestinian. My father went to Italy in 1964 to study medicine, and then with the Six-Day War, when he was 25, he was cut out from his land. He was not ever allowed to return back, and I'm going to speak about it much more during the talk. And so I know many Palestinians, I've been many times in Palestine, I have cousins that I speak to very frequently and with relatives. And the Palestinian people are really, really incredibly beautiful people. Very, very pure, very peaceful, so the fact that they are depicted, so for me, the research I'm doing is because I just don't understand how they are depicted like this, and now everyone is believing something that is not true. So for me as an academic, the only way to make sense of this is really to research it and to develop concepts that explain what's actually going on here. Okay. So I want to say that as I study silence and about the Palestinians, my first gaze and my understanding of what's happening to the Palestinians, and I silence myself. I'm very outspoken now, you know, I'm wearing a keffiyeh, I am openly speaking about Palestine, but this is my second career. My first career was in investment banking in London, and now, I know now I'm not a nice person anymore, but I'm just joking. Yeah, I mean, it's okay. I mean, I'm daughter of immigrants. They need to, you know, manage. We all need to do what we need to do. But what I'm trying to say is that in the corporate environment, as growing up, it was basically impossible to say I was Palestinian. And I went through a process of self-censor. And I'm going to speak about this very, very soon. And I was really trying to understand, as I was witnessing the bombings of Gaza from 2014 and then 2021, and then the March of No Return in the March of Return in the 18, 19, I was really exploding inside to speak as Palestinian and to speak about the violence that was happening. And in those days, really, it was impossible to speak about Palestine. And so we were witnessing this violence. We knew about the violence, but we couldn't speak about it. So I was starting to become public in social media. I was starting to speak about it. And then the genocide happened, and there was this kind of choking sensation that we all had, wanting to shout out about this violence. And yet it was so difficult. Every time I was speaking publicly in social media, I was attacked. So it was a very, very incredibly shocking sensation. And then I went and I explored the writings of other oppressed people, Black women, right? I mean, we spoke about supremacy. I mean, the most vile thing the supremacy has done, many of them, but slavery is certainly one of them, right? So you have many African Americans that write incredibly well, and especially women that are, you know, subjugated by the intersectional the supremacy and the patriarchy. So they really are incredibly articulate in speaking about oppression. And so this is a reading from Audre Lorde, who she wrote this when she was diagnosed with breast cancer. And Audre Lorde is a Black feminist activist, writer, lesbian, incredibly, you broke every possible single skin you can break. She was diagnosed with cancer, and in being diagnosed with cancer, she started to say, oh my gosh, I'm going to die, and I have not said what I want to say. And she wrote an essay, which is really beautiful. It's entitled Turning Silence into Action. And she speaks in this essay about my silence has not saved me, and your silence will not save you. So you must say what you want to say now. And very, very powerful writing, very powerful lineage. Especially, she writes this, which is super interesting. She says, For we have been socialized to respect fear more than our own needs for language and definition, and while we wait in silence for that final luxury of fearlessness, the weight of that silence will choke us. And when I read that, it really reminded me of that choking sensation that I was feeling. I felt, oh my gosh, this is exactly what's happening to me. And this is exactly what's happening to us in the West. This is what's happening to our species. This silence is choking us. So if we cannot speak when there is a genocide, Audre Lorde was awakened by the fact that she was thinking she was going to die. Here we have hundreds of thousands of deaths of children. So the choking sensation is huge. And the silence will not save us. So we need to speak up. And that's why I started to write this paper and want to study silence. And silence is really, really present everywhere, right? I mean, this is an academic that at the beginning, November 2023 in Canada, she was deplatformed from an academic conference because she wanted to speak about Palestine. And so she put herself in protests like this. So the silence, what the silence and the silences have done for Palestinians has really stigmatized Palestinian identity. So as I was writing about silencing and suffering and wanting to speak up, and I was reading Black feminists, I was reading Edward Said, who speaks a lot about, speaking up and Palestinian narrative and the question of Palestine. I was reading much of this stuff. I realized that what the silence does, the silence is an integral part of the erasure of the Palestinians. And this entire presentation will connect silence to erasure. And we draw a clear connection between the silence here and the Nakba there. Okay? So this is basically the end of the conversation today. And as I was elaborating all this, I was speaking to actually my sister, my husband is sitting there, his sister, and I was telling her, I need to speak. This is a stigmatized thing. I want to speak, but there is almost shame in speaking up as Palestinian in this society. Sometimes you have to keep it. It's getting less and less, but you have to keep it secret. You have to be so, people were getting fired at this point. They were speaking about Palestine, right? And still they're getting fired now. Still the NHS does not allow any people to wear any symbols of being Palestinian. So we still need to hide it because it's dangerous to show that you're Palestinian. So she said, it sounds like you're coming out as a Palestinian. And it's interesting because this coming out is when there is a stigmatized identity and people come out. And so I actually wrote an essay, and then I started to study the stigmatization. And stigmatization is very much connected to racialization. What is racialization? Is when, people are dehumanized in a lower category, in a human ranking, right? So, people are racialized because of the color of the skin sometimes. People are racialized because of their ethnic belonging. People sometimes can be racialized and dehumanized for their religion. And they can also be racialized because of their ethnic belonging, like being Palestinian. And so I started to study racialization and racism, and I realized that actually I had been a victim of anti-Palestinian racism all my life without realizing it. And the stigmatization that I was feeling, experiencing, was actually being drawn into me and being internalized by the repeated acts of racism that I had not even realized I'd received during my entire life. And so I wrote this essay, and I wrote it about anti-Palestinian racism, and when the essay was published on the Saturday morning, I went to buy the Financial Times magazine, and I opened it on my table, and it had this picture on it, and the title was "Coming Out as Palestinian." I could not believe that actually my words were now published publicly in the Financial Times. I was touching it like I couldn't believe it. And what happened afterwards is really the most amazing thing that set me on this course and gave me a mission effectively, which I cannot really, I have been chosen to a certain extent. Basically, a lot of people started to reach out to me by email or on social media, and the majority of these people were Palestinians like me in the diaspora. And they were saying, you spoke in our words. You told us exactly, you are saying exactly how we are feeling. One woman from Canada said, you crawled under my skin and you have written with my hands. The amazing, the touching messages that I received made me think like, oh my gosh, I've done something. This is not just me, and I knew that it was not just me, but it's actually really exactly not just me. It's exactly the same for every single Palestinian in the diaspora. And that means, and this means, that every single Palestinian in the diaspora is demobilized. And this means that every single Palestinian in the diaspora will not claim openly they're Palestinians. And this means that they've succeeded in erasing us. And this realization made me think there is so much work that we can do for Palestinians, also outside Palestine. We really need to unpack what's happening here. And that's why I have written the paper, The Industry of Silence, to really unpack how this demobilization is happening in an organized way. And it's very, very easy to say, yes, but it's Israel, the Zionists, the Hezbollah, this and that. No, this is going to be much more beyond that. This has been even internalized by Palestinians. So it's a phenomenon that really needs to be understood in depth. And behind these silences, I believe, what's hidden behind this silence, what is the silence protecting, is the colonial past of the West. Cracking the silence means for the West to have to look at themselves in the mirror. And this is the continuation of this paper that I'm trying to write now, right? So let's go with this paper then. So first of all, I want to say that despite what many people say, Palestine exists. Okay. The word Palestine has actually been thrown through 3,000 years back. It's a beautiful land, and it's a land that is very much, so it was under the Egyptian Empire. By the way, this is all from the Encyclopedia Britannica, and the UK lawyers for Israel have been after this, as they've been after the British Museum, right? Because we need to rewrite history, that's part of the science. So there is a lot from history and a lot of people that have lived in Palestine, and there should be a lot of people that live in Palestine, because Palestine is a land of plurality, but it's also a land at the cross of Asia, Europe, and Africa. It's on beautiful, beautiful parts of the Mediterranean Sea, where many civilizations have lived. And it is a land of the three big monotheistic religions, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. And it should remain the land of the three monotheistic religions. Of course, after World War I, Palestine, after the Sykes-Picot Agreement, Palestine was divided, was assigned to the British Mandate. It was then, by the Peel Commission, partitioned. This is the partitioning of the 1938 Peel Commission. I will touch into the Peel Commission in a second, so I will get more deeply into this. And then in 1947, so this is what happened. The Jerusalem and Jaffa were under British rule, according to the Peel Commission. And then the green one is the Jewish state, and then this would have been the Arab state. And then in 1947, with the creation of the state of Palestine, the Jewish state became much bigger. There is a lot of history behind it. Camp Bernadotte, who was a Swedish UN envoy that had landed the day before the creation of the State of Israel was actually killed by Zionist terrorists, so it could not speak for the UN and the Arabs. So there was effectively a unilateral creation of the State of Israel, where a huge amount of land went to Israel. And then the beige one, the beige part, is Palestine, what should be the State of Palestine. I just want to speak about Palestine at this point. At this point, Palestine was a very plural reality with a quite high, I'm Christian, I come from a Christian family, quite high percentage of Christians. Of course, the majority has always been Muslim historically. This is Jerusalem, and the reason why I put this picture here is because I want to show you that we have, of course, mosques and minarets, but also churches. Try this is a church. And my father grew up in Jerusalem, in a house in the Christian quarter, and from the rooftop of his house, he could see both the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Holy Sepulchre, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And here, of course, there is a multiplicity of people, and these are Palestinian Jews. Of course, there were Jewish people living already in Palestine, and they're Palestinians, which now sounds like an oxymoron. Instead, it should really not be an oxymoron at all. But I also want to say, and the Palestinians were people of the land, and they lived of the land, and they still would like to live of the land. What does it mean? It means that in Palestine you have a fantastic orange crops, citrus fruit crops. Who likes Jaffa cakes? Airways limited. There were airports. Yes, this is the land with no people, for people without a land, right? And of course, we had the middle class, which was developing, which was becoming quite westernized. There was a British mandate, and so there was this beginning of things. And most importantly, and super interestingly, there was a railway. And the railway was going from Beirut to Cairo, through Gaza, Jaffa, Tulkarem, Haifa. How crazy is that? Look at this. Damascus. You could travel uninterruptedly throughout. And this timetable that you cannot read there, I just want to say that on the top is written Palestine Railways. And this picture refers to the Night of the Bridges. So do you know that Israel, 2 weeks ago, bombed all the 7 bridges on the river, on the Litani River, which is this river in south of the. When they did that, I'm like, of course they're bombing the bridges. This is what they do. This is the Night of the Bridges in which they bombed all the railway bridges in Palestine. And it was on between the 16th and 17th of June 1946. So in preparation really of the takeover, they destroyed all the bridges and they destroyed the railway. And we see in the newspapers of that time, we see the voice of Palestinians from the beginning of the 1913 saying, what's happening here? There are all these Jewish people coming from Europe, and they are separating our Jewish people from our Arab people, and they cannot go to the same school anymore. So this was really interesting because Palestinians were really taken aback by this. And even my mom, my mom is an Italian trade unionist, which is in the beginning of the 1970s, married a displaced Palestinian without a job and without anything really, without a house, a job, anything. Family couldn't go back. And of course, you can imagine this is a quite strong woman. And she asked me, but why didn't you fight back? And my father kept on saying, we are good people. It was not, fighting back was not a natural thing for the people of the land. They were in the land, they were living their life. there was really a completely different register of frame of mind between the people of the land and the colonizer. And in a second, you will see why this frame of mind is different. So in 1936, as this amount of invasion, effectively, of Zionist Jews from Europe became bigger and bigger, it was one of the largest civil unrest, civil demonstration of the 20th century that no one knows about. So for me, breaking the silence actually meant going back and getting all this stuff into my paper, because if we don't get this stuff to start with, we are silencing this. Anyway, so in 1936, there was this very big civil unrest where we had women coming down in the streets. How many people have watched the movie Palestine 36?
Yeah, what was called?
As I'm talking about what happened during the movie Palestine 36, right? Which Emmanuel Jaser, who actually has a very similar surname to mine. It's written in the same way in Arabic. We don't come from the same Islamic family. But Emmanuel Jaser is from Bethlehem, originally her family. And she's the director of the movie. So there were women, there were a lot of falain, so, peasants, effectively. They came down from the countryside. But also, and then these are the British people. They were really suppressing. But also, we started to have a very strong and organized Arab resistance, finally. Yes? So we are starting to have a bit of a problem for the Brits. And of course, the first thing the Brits do when there is a problem, they launch a commission of inquiry. That's how we deal with problems. You launch a commission of inquiry. And this commission of inquiry was called the Pink Commission. How many people know about the Pink Commission? Yeah?
That's right.
I know Simon, the Pink. And then you do some amazing research about it. So the Pink Commission is a Lord Peel invited people to contribute testimonies to the commission. So a lot of people submitted testimonies. There are not as many testimonies from Arab people, especially secret testimony for Arab people, as there are from other people for various contentious arguments that happened at that time. But we have a lot of publics, we have a lot of public mentions, but we also have many hundreds of pages of secret testimony. And the secret testimony of the commission, of which of course the most interesting one, because if you have to say something in secret, that means is interesting and consequential, otherwise you would say publicly. So the secret part of the Peel Commission was only published in 2017. So some people had access before, but the actual documents which became available to the public in 2017 when they were moved to the National Archives of Kew. And this is where my research on racialization of Palestinians starts to become really interesting from a historical perspective. Because of course we understand the Palestinians are dehumanized and racialized, because dehumanization is the first step of genocide. You cannot be doing what you're doing if you're not dehumanizing them. But I'm trying to understand exactly what, can we speak about racialization here? And then, of course, we come across this testimony from Sir Winston Churchill, from the Peel Commission, in which Lord Peel asks Winston Churchill, what shall we do with the Arabs? So 1936, actually this part of the testimony happens in 1937. There is this unrest. The Brits do not know what to do anymore in the land of Israel and Palestine. Palestine, still called Palestine, Israel doesn't exist yet. And so he asked, so what shall we do? Sir Winston, tell me, And this is the answer the Zahira Church gives. I do not agree that the dog in a manger has the final right to the manger, even though he may have lain there for a very long time. I do not admit that right. The dog in the manger is the Palestinians.
Nobody.
But this is not the best that he says. I do not admit, for instance, that a great wrong has been done to the Red Indians of America or the black people of Australia.
You.
I do not admit that a wrong has been done to these people by the fact that a stronger race,
Yeah.
a higher grade race, a more worldly wide race, to put it that way, has come in and taken the place. And he continues with because he has more power, and so on the next slide. That's basically what they say. When I heard this testimony for the first time, spoken by a woman from Gaza, dressed in an embroidered Palestinian Baptist dress, in the House of Parliament. And this should be a reason for much hope. But this is what we are contending with. This is what we are contending with today.
Good.
This is what we are silencing. And always remember that the colonizer, before dehumanizing the colonized, needs to dehumanize themselves. It's very difficult to look in the mirror of history for the colonizer, because this is what they're gonna see. And it's not pretty. And it undoes a lot of myths and a lot of patriotism. And we know what's happening because patriotism is under threat. But of course, we can have forms of patriotism that are inclusive, and maybe it's involving us to think of in Britain right now. Anyway, when I say the Palestinians are the people of the land, and they are the indigenous people of the land, and they live the produce of the land, you now understand exactly what I'm talking about. Because also the Red Indians, the native people of America were the people of the land, and the black people of Australia were the people of the land. Yes? And they were living in harmony with the land. Israelis are not living in harmony with the land. They're bombing, destroying, covering the fields, agricultural fields with phosphorus and with stuff. So what we're witnessing right now, in front of our eyes, is the settler colonialism, which removed the Native American people from their lands and the Australian Aboriginal people from their lands today, in front of our eyes, live on our screens. And this is what we are silencing, because it's too brutal to become aware, to become fully present with, to become fully conscious of for the people of the West. But of course, I'm telling this to you today as if it was something new. But this is something that in academic circles has been studied forever. So here I've got 3 books. One is from Fayez Sayed, which is who is a Syrian scholar who was already writing Zionist colonialism in Palestine in 1965. Then we also have the book by George Jambour, who was writing about settler colonialism in South Africa, and is drawing a parallel between the settler colonialism and South Africa in 1970. And then, of course, we then have a European white scholar who is considered the utmost authority in settler colonialism, and in fact, he is a fantastic scholar who unfortunately passed away in 2006, but before passing away, he's gifted us with this beautiful book called Traces of History, an elementary structure of race, in which it tells us, actually 2016 he passed away, in which he tells us that settler colonialism is race-making. It's a specific historical process where the indigenous people must be racialized and eliminated because they are in the way of the colonizers. Settler colonialists, differently from other colonialists, occupies the land, takes the land, and replaces the population. How many of you have heard about replacement theories? Yes? Every accusation is an admission. White people cannot say they are being replaced. They replace people right, left, and center throughout the last few hundred years. And they're doing it now in Palestine. Because remember that in Palestine, racialization works also for the Jews. So if you are an Israeli Jew or an Arab Jew, you are definitely lower in the hierarchy than if you are a European Ashkenazi Jew. And we know that the colonialism is driven by the European Ashkenazi Jew. And we know that all the majority, the vast majority of the government class at top level is of Ashkenazi descent. They're European settlers who also happen to be Jewish. And this is the settler colonial project of Palestine. And, we spoke about the 1947, and we spoke about the UN plan. I spoke about this at the beginning. This is between 49 and 67, and then in 67, it was, everything was occupied, and then this is the Oslo Accords, of which I will speak very briefly. This is my father. So this guy with a big nose, tall, with big nose, that's him. He now here is dressed as a choir boy in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre because he was Christian, choir boy in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. This is my family without my father. Because in 1964, he went to Italy to study medicine. In 1967, Israel in 6 days occupied all the land of Palestine this was the preemptive war. Have you ever heard about preemptive war? Preemptive wars are words that you use because you think someone might be attacking you in the future. Anyway, this was the first preemptive war because at this point in time, Nasser in Egypt was making accords with the Jordanian ruler to unite forces to ensure that they could defend their borders. And as this pan-Arab agreement was starting to be reached, Israel attacked. Israel absolutely is threatened by Arab unity. If we always instigate disunity, fragmentation, because fragmentation demobilizes. Yes? Divided world. So we always fragment. Hezbollah, and yes, Christian, and then the Iranian, and then this and that. There's always someone that is about to attack Israel, which is very sad because Israel basically cannot exist without war. And it's a destabilizing entity. So we need to shift to a form of governance of the land which is more balanced than the one we have now.
Okay.
Anyway, so the interesting thing about this is that the more I dig into it, and I could spend all my life looking at these kind of things, the more I find that you even have Zionists that actually say that this is a takeover of the land and it's a settler colonial project, and there was never any intention of having a Palestinian state or a place for Palestinians. So this is an historian called Sima Flapan writing this book, The Birth of Israel, in which he says the labor Zionists in coalition with the liberals led by Chaim Weizmann, viewed the realization of the Zionist aim as a long-term process in cooperation with Great Britain. They sought to reduce the level of conflict with the Arabs. I want to draw your attention on this important historical mechanism. They sought to reduce the level of conflict with the Arabs in order to maximize immigration and settlements and to allow the building of the Jewish economy in Palestine. They sought to reduce the level of conflict with the Arabs. Peace, the perspective of peace agreements are seen as devices to demobilize the Arabs, the Palestinians, in order for settler colonialism to continue. And this is exactly what's happened with the Oslo Agreement. And this is exactly what happened with the majority of peace talks. It's something that is used to neutralize the anger of the colonized to then progress silently with the colonizing project. This is written by a Jewish Zionist person, Simon Flapan, in 1987. And this is what the colonizing project is. Remember that racialization means that the colonizer always decided who is the savage versus the civilized. And this is exactly what happens in the land. So you can see an Israeli settlement and you can see a Palestinian village. And the way you distinguish a Palestinian village, apart from the fact that it's much nicer, much more, in harmony with the land, and so on and so forth, apart from all this, is because Palestinian houses will always have water tanks on the roofs. How many people have been in the West Bank? How many people know this, right? So, you have water tanks on the roof. Whilst settlements have green gardens, swimming pools, fountains, because they control the water grids, whilst Palestinians cannot control the water grids. Now, whoever has been in the West Bank knows this. This is not an hidden kind of thing. And of course, this kind of racism is institutionalized. So this is the West Bank divided in area A, B, and C, and this is area C, which is actually the area under military control. And then there are books. These are two of my favorite academics, Yasmin Abulaban of Palestinian descent and Abigail Bakan of Jewish descent, who actually writes Israel, Palestine, and the Politics of Race. And they speak about the racial contract that Israel has created with the Palestinians. I also want to remind you that on the 11th of November 1975, the United Nations passed a resolution called Zionism is Racist. In fact, the resolution said, determines, this is the UN General Assembly determines that Zionism is a form of racism and racial discrimination. So in 1975, it was pretty clear that what was happening was racism and racialization. What happened afterwards? In 1991, in order to participate to the Madrid Conference for Peace, which was the conference that was laying the grounds for Oslo, the Israeli requested that in order to participate to that conference, this resolution had to be rescinded. So Resolution 337 was rescinded for Israel to participate to the peace agreements. Yeah. And this is the birth of Oslo. Which was called the core engine, the core idea behind Oslo was the swap for arms versus land. You put down your weapons, you stop attacking us, we give you the land. We know what's happened. There are more books about racism. I just want to speak very quickly about, I will just create now connection about this reality and the silencing of this reality and the Nakba. So the Nakba is called the catastrophe. It's the removal of 750,000 Palestinians from their ancestral homes in 1947 and early 1949 during the creation of the State of Israel. But the Nakba is an ongoing process. So the first person that spoke about the Nakba as an ongoing process, I think I've got something here. Well, anyway, the Nakba is an ongoing process. The first person that spoke about the Nakba as an ongoing process is Hanan Ashrawi, who is a Palestinian politician. And the way in which the Nakba manifests itself is through fragmentation. The Nakba fragments everything. So of course there is displacement, of course there is genocide, of course there is apartheid. But the mechanism through which it's operationalized is fragmentation. So these are all the color-coded Israeli kind of laissez-passer and documents that that fragments the population. So of course you have the full passport for all the Israelis and some Palestinians living in Israel, and then you have people in the West Bank in area A, B, Palestine. You have people in Gaza that have a different kind of document. So there are so many documents, and then people of East Jerusalem, which have also another document. So you have 6 types of documents. But what's happening with these 6 types of documents is that so fragmentation induces the possibility of cohesion amongst the Palestinians. What's happening with all these documents is that Palestinians then undergo different legal regimes. So if a Palestinian for Palestinian lawyers, it's impossible to defend Palestinians, right? And so it's very difficult. So we had one lawyer called Rabia Guaria who proposed wrote a paper entitled Towards the Nakba and the Legal Concept. So he said we have genocide, we have apartheid, we also have the Nakba. When he wrote this, talking about silencing, when he wrote this, the website of the Columbia Law Review was crushed because they didn't want it to be published, and that it was restored. And also I wanted to speak for a second, and these are very academic slides, so I'm going to move very fast now. I just wanted to say that a big part of this fragmentation is the division of the West Bank with the Palestinian Authority and Gaza with Hamas. Because the Palestinian Authority, which is actually considered an agent of Israel by many, the core work for the Palestinian Authority is to sedate, to repress any type of rebellion, to keep the Palestinians completely disarmed. And the core work of Hamas is, apart from doing organization in Gaza, which is an organization, is also to run an armed resistance, okay? And so if you think about these two things coexisting, what the occupying force has been able to do, it has orchestrated both the demilitarization and the militarization of the Palestinian society. And by doing that, they've created a perfect environment for their internal demobilization and international condemnation. This is engineered. The fragmentation works to demobilize the Palestinians and also to have them condemned as terrorists at the same time. And we know that Hamas, which is actually the Palestinian resistance that belongs to the Palestinians of Gaza, but was also financed through interventions by Netanyahu, who had money sent to Qatar. And these are things that are published in Israeli newspapers, so it's ongoing very well. Anyway, I want just to say that then I started to write a little bit more about anti-Palestinian racism. So if Palestinians are racialized, that how does this racialization manifest itself? And this is a very interesting point, because one of the reasons why I have been invited to speak quite a lot and people have found interest in my work is because I started to speak about anti-Palestinian racism, which is something quite tangible that we can all learn and call out. And one of the documents that I wrote when there were the encampments during the summer of 2024, we had students' encampments, there were student encampments everywhere, and the first people and students that participated in these encampments were called terrorists. Some of them were actually referred to prevent the anti-terrorist law, which is a horrible thing to do because when you're referred to prevent, you're effectively isolated, not even, people cannot even finance your lawyer without becoming, it's like supporting Palestine action, right? When you are deemed a terrorist, you go into a parallel legal system. And so for me, it was very important to write a document to say, no, these guys are not terrorists. Calling them terrorists is part of the racism. Calling them terrorists, in fact, is racism. Okay, so I wrote this document, which is a compendium of a lot of literature about the Palestinian racism, and I defined 3 points, just for a shorthand that we can all remember. One is, it is racist to deny the existence of Palestine and the Palestinians. It is racist to deny the suffering of the Palestinians at the hands of Israel. It is racist to call the Palestinians anti-Semite and terrorists just because they're Palestinian.
So,
It's racist.
yeah.
And it's rooted in the historical racialization of the Palestinians. And it is part of the Nakba, because all this is done to silence the Palestinians and to eliminate, stigmatize the Palestinian identity, so they're not even Palestinian, saying they're Palestinians. And then there is more stuff that is coming around about the Palestinian races, this is the Arab, so Palestinians are gaslighted all the time. This is, possibly the closest thing that we have to a description of anti-Palestinian racism by the Arab-Canadian Lawyer Association. They're doing a lot of work about this. We spoke about the denial of existence of Palestinians. So this is Golda Meir saying that Palestinians don't exist. This is the denial of the suffering. So we have some people in Israel that think that everything that is happening in Gaza is an invention. And there are websites called Hollywood where people think that the suffering is staged. And of course, we know about defamations of anti-Semitism and terrorism is everywhere. But the manifestation of the silencing, really are everywhere, because then if you start playing into this idea of Palestinians are anti-Semites, uncivilized, yes, that's the colonialism that kicks us here, right? The uncivilized terrorists, the Palestinian monsters. This is the language of certain colonialism amongst us. Then when we have some plates painted by children in Gaza in the Chelsea hospital, you have young Jewish people that go in and say, I feel very threatened by this plate. Seriously, no, this is unfortunately what happens. London Hospital removes Gazan artwork after patients complain. Images featured in the exhibition included one of Palestinians covering the entire town of Israel, from the river to the sea. February 2023, before October 7. Waving Palestinian flag might be criminal offense, Braisman tells police. This is all part of the silencing. Yes? Palestinian marches are Hamas marches. How much have we heard that? But there are also much more structured way of silencing. For example, the definition, the International Holocaust Alliance definition, which has been adopted by many universities, also by University of Sussex, which institutionally people want to. There is a law in the Italian Senate now, that is hopefully not passing, but they want to adopt at the state level the IHRA. So there is a lot of lobbying really for silencing voices against Israel, and this is what the IHRA does. It extends the definition to anti-Semitism to those that speak badly about Israel, like me. But of course, I'm just citing facts. And everything that I cite is documented in previous research. So I would love to be taken to court.
But
It's a joke, I don't. It's just a waste of time. I've got other stuff to do, right? Anyway, yeah, and so I mean, one way in which I am developing this research further, and I haven't even yet got to the industry of science, I'm going to get there in a second, is what kind of, the concept of racial harm that is done to the psyche of Palestinians, right? And to us. So, think about the Nakba as an earthquake that goes from the occupied Palestinian territories, Israel, transnational diaspora, support of Palestinians, but really gets into our mind and programs us to think in a certain way towards Palestinians. So this silencing is incredibly powerful, and it really works relentlessly over time, conditioning us, and we internalize ideas that are really terrible. And what actually happened also is implemented through organizations, and this is where the industry of science comes in. So we have organizations that implement racist ideas. So this is actually Francesca Albanese, who actually wrote something about companies participating to the genocide. And we know the companies participate directly to the genocide by providing components for arms, providing, surveillance techniques, and so on and so forth. But there are also companies that participate to racialization in very indirect ways. And this is what I call the industry of silence. Finally, I got to it. So Palestinians are always watched, but they are never seen because the symbols are hidden. And they're never heard because the narrative is always removed. And they're always watched in the sense that we know that Palestinians are the most watched people in the world. This is a book by an Australian Jew, of course. We have a huge amount of Jewish people that write against Zionism because Zionism is race-making also to Jewish people, right? And so they rebel to this concept. And so Anthony Lowenstein writes The Palestinian Laboratory, which is a book in which describes how, a lot of technologies for surveillance is tested on Palestinians and then sold abroad. We also know that this is the first AI organized genocide where we have AI systems like Lavender targeting people that have resemblances of other people in a database and then decide to kill them overnight. There is also another system that targets them when they are in their houses with their families. All this is investigative journalism that has been published.
Right.
Yeah. So they're always watched, but they're never seen. They're never seen because when you have Palestinian children, when they have, you have content on Palestine. That's a tweet of mine that was shadow banned. I know you cannot see. I'm so sorry. This screen is very small. It doesn't matter. The more important thing is to say, wearing a keffiyeh at the beginning was seen as an act of terrorism. There is a physical cancellation of the events. There is social media shadow banning. So they really are removed from the site. Removed from site. Yes. So watch, survey, remove from site. And the third part on the industry of silence is never heard. Palestinian narrative is never heard. Edward Said in 1984 actually, 2 years after Shabra and Shatila, who was a massacre of Palestinians in Lebanon, wrote an essay which was entitled Permission to Narrate. And this is a very famous essay in which he says Palestinians must be able to tell their story. Mm. And that's why I also feel, to a certain extent, invested of a mission to tell the story. and to make sure that the silence is broken.
Yeah.
And so you have, so the Palestinian narrative is, it's hidden in many ways. We know at the beginning, especially of the genocide, how much more the Israeli narrative was heard than the Palestinian narrative. I now live in a complete Palestinian bubble, so I've lost any objectivity, but it's also, there is no more Palestine in the headlines now. There is Iran in the headlines. There is no more suffering of Palestinians in the headlines. And also, when we speak about Palestine, we speak about Arab-Israeli clashes, the very famous clashes during the genocide, or people, Palestinian, I don't know if I put more stuff, Palestinian die once the Israelis are killed. So the language is always a language where the Palestinian suffering is really never heard. So there is no Palestinian narrative that is exposed. So yes, it's very important when we study silence. I mean, I come from the discipline of studying organizations and business. I'm a business scholar, actually. And so for me, studying how things are organized is very important. That what happens in organizations is very important. But often when we study organization, we study them historically. So we know that people do not speak because they're afraid of their boss. So we know that people don't speak because they've internalized certain things. But we don't really look at the history by which this silencing is built and why some people are more silenced than others. So this is the kind of research I'm doing. And so for me, racialization, fragmentation, demobilization, silence, and erasure is a cycle, right? Is a cycle. And of course, genocide can only happen in silence. This is a wall of the University of Padua. I took a picture of, and I finished my presentation here. And I want to say, the next time we're afraid to speak for Palestine, that's the Nakba amongst us. That is creating an area of the Palestinians here amongst us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That was really informative and moving. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Just to remind everyone, we'll have a sort of a break for about a quarter of an hour, shall we say, till about 25 to 9. Just to remind you, there are pencils and...
Hello. Yes. Thank you so much for all of you for coming. I don't know if anybody else has got any questions if they've got questions they want to ask and they haven't handed me something, please do. But I'll go through the ones I've been handed and then I'll open it up to the floor. So, Western institutions often champion absolute free speech, yet they frequently implement administrative barriers for Palestinian content, such as cancelling academic events. Has this ever happened to you?
Thank you. That's a very good question.
Can you switch on your microphone?
Your microphone gardener up in It's a special kind of gardening. That looks after microphones. Thank you so much. So this is a very good question. I think that what's happened here is because I've been studying silencing and races. Every time I've been attacked, hit platforms, I've said, you're just already sick. And naturally as works. So learning the language of anti-Palestinian races is very important. But I need to make a very important note here. We do not want to exceptionalize Palestinians as racialized above others. as I said at the beginning of the presentation, it is extremely important that we understand the races, all types of races, including anti-Semitism, are the products of the same structure of oppression. So all races need to be called out and condemned and fought in the same way. And I'm not saying this to be politically correct. I am saying this because we know how horrible it is to exceptionalize one type of races over the others. We've seen what happens when some kinds of races, for example, anti-Semitism, is instrumentalized. We don't want that to happen. It's incredibly important when we speak about anti-Palestinian racism that we contextualize it as a form of racism about many races, however, a very salient one right now because the Palestinian people are under the risk of erasure. And so, by speaking about racism and defining it very clearly and becoming a little bit of an expert on it, this has allowed me to counter people that say, but you're an anti-Semite. I'm like, no, I'm really not. And you're a racist. Oh, but Palestine does not exist. What are you saying? You're a racist. We got the platform because you're Palestinian. You're a racist. It's as simple as that. As simple as that. That's 3 minutes. Thank you.
It's okay. Thanks.
This one isn't really a question, it's a statement, but you can speak to it. It's Western media often portrays Palestinian deaths as statistics while humanizing Israeli deaths as victims, creating a hierarchy of empathy that delegitimizes Palestinian suffering.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. And this is what I describe as part of the industry of silence. And I say the Palestinians are never seen. So Palestinians are never seen in their humanity or never heard in their suffering. So that's really part of the industry of silence. It's part of this organized way of dehumanizing the Palestinians amongst us here. Throughout our institutions. So yeah, absolutely, that's so true.
So how does the portrayal of Palestinian resistance solely as terrorism obscure the systematic violence of the occupation?
Well, first of all, it's very important to say that resistance is not just armed resistance, first of all. I think that I am operating a form of resistance and activism by being here as an academic speaking about the history of Palestine. There are many forms of resistance that are pacific and they're not armed, and therefore they cannot be deemed terrorist by Western. I also would like to recall the work of a fellow academic who unfortunately passed away recently, called Conor Gertie, who is one of the most important human rights and famous human rights lawyers. And he's done a lot of work. He's Irish, worked at the London School of Economics, human rights lawyer. He did a lot of work on the definition of terrorism. And in his latest books, he has really seen how, especially after September the 11th, the definition of terrorism has expanded so much that, and it shows how it also is a political, a political definition. So a lot of definitions of terrorism and political agendas. Having said that, I am against the killing of humans in general, personally. But on the other hand, when we look at the history of colonialism, and we look at scholars of colonialism, armed resistance is the only way in which some people have been, like the Algerian, for example, have been able to get rid of the colonizer. So, I'm speaking about historical facts. I'm also speaking about historical scholars, so we have Charles Fanon and other people. And also speaking as a psychologist, I'm a social psychologist, and I know what happens to the psyche of people under that kind of oppression. People, for Palestinians, what we are seeing is it's not just a physical space that is reduced, but it's also their mental space. Sometimes I speak with some friends in the West Bank and they tell me, so we tiptoe around into conversation. I say, we cannot say anything. I say, fine. And then a friend of mine said, but I don't know if I actually can think something. Maybe they see me. So when we are getting to this level of conditioning, in order to survive as humans, people have to resist in some shape or form. And then, of course, you are preparing a really fertile territory for unresistance. Yeah. So, to the question.
While you were speaking, it made me think, as when we stand at the station every Saturday, and we're peaceful, and we're friendly, and we get called terrorists.
Yeah.
They shouted us, "You're terrorists, you're domestic bulletins, you killed," yeah.
So that's the thing, yeah. It's like the instrumentalization of the definition of anti-Semitism. And there is a very beautiful book written by a Jewish Israeli person, in fact, called Rachel Shabi. She's a broadcaster. I don't know if you've ever heard her. The book is called Off-White. And she speaks beautifully about the instrumentalization of anti-Semitism. But also the instrumentalization of terrorism then becomes another concept that expands so much that becomes almost meaningless, like, arresting people that hold the placards with a very famous sentence about Palestine action. Exactly, absolutely.
If the ICJ finally decide that Israel has been committed genocide in Gaza, what impact will this have on the ongoing Nakba in Palestine?
So I am not an international lawyer, and I am not especially in international law. But I know that the International Court of Justice verdict is due in 2027. And so far, when there has been a verdict of genocide, things have happened that has been consequential. So I really hope it's only consequential in this case too. In some way, I don't want to speculate, but in some way, the situation is so unsustainable that, how much can we escalate? Right? How much more can we escalate the situation? And so some intervention, something we have to happen to stop what is going on. We are all there to observe. Some informed observer would say that it's the end of empire, maybe we're witnessing the end of empire, maybe we're witnessing the end of this colonial system, and we know that these colonial systems do not go away easily without violence. Some people say we are witnessing the end of a form of fascism. Ilan Pape, who is a professor at the University of Sussex, that I'm sure you know it all, they say this is the end of Zionism. And of course, we know that all the isms, when they finish, they don't finish very nicely. Being Italian, I'm very familiar with Primo Levi, who is a Jewish Italian that survived the concentration camps. And one of his very famous sentences is, fascism always end in the lager, in the concentration camp. So, what we're seeing in Gaza is a concentration camp. Really, it should be the end of fascism. So, there are a lot of things that can happen and that we are witnessing historical patterns that we can recognize. But unfortunately, I don't know exactly what's going to happen.
Is there anybody who would like to? Zahira, do you want to start? Shall I give you a card?
You speak for the silencing and erasure of all peoples of the long-standing colonial project. Thank you. Are your writings available, your research, your work available publicly for us to access and read?
Yes, absolutely. So if you go under my name and surname, okay, here, and write University of Sussex, you come into my profile and then you have all my papers underneath. The paper, The Industry of Silence, is under paywall, but there is also a thing, if you click on it, you would also have access to a free copy under the repository of the University of Sussex. If you reach out, they will send you a paper, you can please. And then I'm writing, hopefully, at some point, a book about this. Inshallah. That's it.
Are there any more questions? Anybody else who'd like to ask a question or say anything, even not a question? Leslie?
For Zahira, we were talking earlier about where do we go from here?
Yeah. Cool. Thank you. Thank you for that question. It's a difficult one. There are many ways to think about where do we go from here, and I would like to actually think who in this we, right? I mean, let's say that the we is us here, because I don't know where we go from here in Israel. I don't know where we go from here in the US, but we can do something about where we go from here. And often when I do these talks, people become very hopeless. And they tell me things like, where do we go from here? Or I've lost all my friends because they support Palestine, or I've been doing this all my life. And this is usually people that are quite later in the arc of life. They tell me, what do we do? And I really feel very strongly for the people that have fought all their life for Palestine, and they're finding themselves now with this in front of them. And I am very sometimes grateful that my father passed away 10 years ago so that I had to witness this. But this is an epochal moment. What we are witnessing here is the end of colonialism. That's why it's so ugly. And very soon people realize that it's not pretty. It's not a pretty sight to go in the West to watch themselves in the mirror of history, and therefore that's why it is so difficult and so ugly and also so hopeless. But interesting, when I visit my friends I was in Amman last summer during what the Iranian calls the 12 Days War, which was that very short attack on Iran that happened in the summer in June 2024. And I was in Amman and we could see the missiles going above our heads. And I'm not saying this with lightness, because as I just said earlier on, I really don't like war, or I don't like people dying. But there was a certain level of hope in Amman that these wars that we are seeing are the end of a cycle of violence, or either the beginning of a massive war, or someone in the world will come to their senses and will say, let's stop this. Okay? And so if we have to stop it, then what do? We have to find some ways, some form of solidity. There are balances shifting, there is a lot going on. So we just need to hear us, we need to continue. Because this is much bigger than us. I mean, at the beginning, when there was all this thing about Palestinians being arrested, called terrorists, my mom said, be careful be careful not to say, she's actually very encouraging all the time, but that particular moment when they were arresting the students, you know, so be careful. And I said, I'm not saying this to show that I'm a hero at all, but I said, but this is the time in which we are put in prison for our ideas, because otherwise, what do we do? You know, what do we do? So I'm not saying that we are told to be put in prison, but I think this is the time where we need to stay strong and learn from the Palestinians. And learn from the Palestinians on the land. And I know that in Gaza, the situation is, in fact, Abdul Rahman, I don't know if you want to say something, or maybe I'm putting you on the spot, but you're the most qualified person to speak about what's happening in Gaza, but you don't have to. But what's happening in Gaza right now is very difficult. People are losing hope in a certain, right? Yes. And we must stay strong for them. We must support them in any possible way. I was in Barcelona on Sunday. The flotilla was leaving from Barcelona. Must. There is no other thing to do. We don't have an alternative. It's like two people getting promised.
Hi. Do you think that it's no coincidence that it's almost like Palestine is leading the way to break free from the colonization when we see what's happening in Africa today? I was born in France, and the French government over the years have done terrible damage to many African countries, and it's almost like this incredible strength and courage and stoicism of the Palestinians and their faith that is so admirable. That's what moves me so much deeply. It's almost like they are the flag of this might be freedom soon in the world of all this. Do you think it might have sadly been almost chosen?
I mean, I actually often say the Palestine will liberate us all, which is exactly what you're saying. And when I say Palestine will liberate us all, is because it's very, 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 very simple for me. And I've said this like from very early on. Either we have a war with Palestine, or we have a war without international law. It's very, very simple. And Palestine is also showing us what happens within colonialism, what happened, as I showed in presentation, to the, I'm going to use Churchill's words, the Red Indian of America and the Black people of Australia. So we are witnessing now what happened in Algeria. How many people have watched the movie The Battle of Algiers? You should watch that movie. Watch The Battle of Algiers. It was a movie done by an Italian director called Pontecorvo, Gino Pontecorvo. Grazie. Thank you. Shukran. And it, you know, when you watch The Battle of Algiers, which shows you exactly what happened in Algeria and how Algeria finished, it's a must watch. You watch the colonial playbook and you're like, oh my gosh, that's exactly what's happening in Palestine. So this is what we are witnessing. And the fact that we are witnessing it after the Second World War and the framework of international law that was put in place, and the United Nations and all the laws against genocide that have been put in place, and the fact that we have the ICJ and the ICC, the fact that this is actually happening, notwithstanding the apex of human civilization, which are these institutions, and the apex of our civilization, which is the idea of universal human rights, it's anachronistic, right? It's anachronistic. How can we be the same species that does that and makes these promises and then commits a genocide or allows the genocide to be committed in Gaza? We are all living in dissonance as a species. This is not me or you or my microphone guardian angel. It's our species.
Down.
So we should really be confident about where we are going to go, and find much hope in solidarity. And I think that since this genocide has happened, the solidarity that we are seeing is making us feel alive again. Palestine is making us feel alive again. We have a very clear cause that is so clear that what's happening there is absolutely, without any doubt, bad, colonial, violent, beyond any human principle. It's a zenith. We should continue to go in that direction.
Perhaps one thing we can all do now is support the Gaza flotilla, which is sailing right now to Gaza. There's been some conversation about it. Zahira and I met a wonderful person, maybe Zahira, you want to talk about that a bit, who's sailing there. So on social media, we can all promote them, support them, tell people.
Yeah. So there is a lot of I'll come to you in a second. Thank you very much. I've seen you. I'm still listening. So the flotilla. So the flotilla is a group of people that have decided to take it in their hands to apply international law, which says that when people are under siege and they need humanitarian aid can end. That's as simple as that, right? That's what the flotilla is trying to do. The previous flotillas were very symbolic. There was a lot of symbolism, a lot of very important people, prominently Greta Thunberg was, and there was a lot of noise. And this lot of noise is nice on one hand, but on the other hand, it attracts attention in terms of is this just white saviorism? Are people mentioned? So this flotilla is much quieter in actually not having very important people as prominent heroes. But for this reason, we should not let it pass and forget about it. And that's why I think it's very important that we actually support them. Because they are stuck in this between you're a white savior, you're only doing symbolic stuff, to actually we really are sailing. We are now 100 boats and we want to do this. So, there is a lot going on. But every little helps. We all need to move in the direction of Palestine, whether by boats, whether intellectually, whether by coming here, whether by reading, whether by educating, whether by speaking, whether we need to do, all of us. There is so much to do for all of us to participate to the liberation of Palestine.
Cool. Listen.
Thank you. You said so much that's so arresting. I just want to pick up one point. You referred to the hospital that took down the paintings by Palestinian children. What exactly are they afraid of? What are the forces at work in to make them behave like that?
Yes, but the force at work is Irish, but I think that the thing that was particularly interesting there is I don't think we should underestimate the conditioning under which also Zionist people have gone. Look, I'm not here to let them off the hook. But a lot of Jewish people and Zionist people are really brought up thinking that the Palestinians are truly terrorists. They really believe that. Now, clearly they are not, but they really believe that. And they also are brought up thinking that the Palestinians really want them dead. The Palestinians don't want them dead. The Palestinians, many young Palestinians often speak about a one state.
Yes.
You know what the one state means? It means everyone in one state with the same rights. It doesn't mean go back, go away, get rid of everyone. This is going to be an Arab ethno state. It does not mean that. But because Zionism is a religious ethno-supremacist movement, the idea of a one state is the greatest threat you can give to Zionism. Because if it is a one state with everyone having the same right, it cannot be a religious ethno-supremacist movement. And that's why when a Palestinian child paints Palestine on a plate, that becomes a threat to Zionism. That's why.
Has anybody else got anything they either want to say or they want to have another thought? You know,
I wanted to add to this gentleman's comment. My daughter works in a theatre in London, the Royal Court, and this young bunch of artists / ushers who trying to survive the high rents in London, they started to put little, this on their lapel, and suddenly one of the Jewish donors of the theatre sent a message very strongly that it had to stop. And so they found other ways to do it, like if someone had a bandage, but it's showing the strength, the infiltration and the power. So if someone had a little hurt on they had a bandage, they would just draw a little watermelon on their bandage. And they find ways, the young people, because they know it's the right thing. And also on the note of hope, I wanted to share something with you, which I've shared with the people I stand with on Saturday mornings. I've lived in Paris for many years, and I saw the problems with racism there, deeply anchored, especially with people from Africa. And recently, I saw something that made me completely burst into tears. In one of the town halls of Paris, a gentleman from Africa, from one of the colonized African, I forgot if it's Ghana or a beautiful man, has been voted as mayor. And just like Mr. Mandani in New York, people need representation. They need to be representing. And you know what the crowd shouted when he was being elected? In French, but I say it in English. We are all the children of Gaza. Can you imagine how beautiful that felt to hear that? So yeah, I think it's a very positive note to say that people are finally understanding. We
want to get rid of this dissonance. We cannot live in this situation where we know what's right and what's good and what's, and have this, exactly, principle of universal human rights and have a genocide happening in our spring. It's not possible. It's unsustainable psychologically for everyone.
That sounds like a very hopeful note to probably finish on, I think. So, is that okay? Anyone's got anything bursting that they want to say?
Okay. Thank you for being such a gracious audience.
Right, fantastic. Thank you so much again, Dr. Jaser. That was an amazing talk, and thank you. I think we'll all go away with lots of memories of tonight. And you encouraged us to say we're there every Saturday, and there's loads of people here who give so much time putting the movement, and always thinking of the Palestinians, and who really inspired us. So big thanks, and also thank you so much everybody here tonight, all the helpers. Fantastic. And just a reminder that if there are any donations, please collect the Palestine near us at the back. That'd be much appreciated. But once again, a big thank you for our speaker.
Thank you so much.